Greetings. This is the one you've known as Jesus the Christ. I'd like to talk with you about something I haven't said much about before: death. Many people struggle with being afraid of dying, mostly because of what they believe about death and dying. I'd like to say some, hopefully, comforting things about death to ease your minds and hearts about this great mystery. Death is not the end of your existence, not by far. You are eternal beings. What I mean by this is that your soul was spun off of all that is, the oneness, and will eventually return or re-merge with the oneness or source. But even that is not a death, but a reunion of the most glorious kind. For when you exist as all that is, you know nothing but love and joy, eternally. So although your individual soul is not eternal, the consciousness that takes on a soul and evolves through the physical plane and other non-physical dimensions is eternal. You are God, literally. This is difficult to take in and understand while you're in a human body. Your humanness is so convincing. Even once you're awakened or become enlightened, you still experience yourself as human, and that will continue to be so for most, even after they leave their body. Most retain their sense of being human in between lifetimes, as long as they're still reincarnating. After death, some personality and certain tendencies and interests remain while you exist on the astral plane. How much you retain this sense of being human depends on your level of evolution and other things. Since it's difficult for you to realize that you are divine, you'll have to take my word for this. You are not human. You are essentially divine, meaning you are made of the stuff that God is made of. And for lack of a better word, we will call this stuff consciousness or love. Both of these words point to something intangible, mysterious, and difficult to say much else about. Words fail in describing your essential nature, since words weren't designed for such things. Words were designed to describe things, and you are not a thing, although you may feel like you are your particular body-mind. However, that is simply the conception of the mind, the best the mind can do to comprehend the mystery of who you are. The closest thing to what you are would naturally be thought to be your body-mind, so your mind conceives of you as your body-mind. It's actually quite obvious to something other than your mind, to consciousness, to who you really are, that you are much different than your body-mind. Who you really are knows who you really are. And from this standpoint, it isn't hard to see that the body-mind is simply an instrument for the consciousness that enlivens the body-mind. And so we can speak about your essence as what enlivens the body-mind. For the body-mind is nothing lasting and quickly disintegrates without this mysterious life force or consciousness. When you see a body that's no longer enlivened by this force, it's obvious that that body is no longer inhabited by what made that person uniquely himself or herself, and that it no longer contains the essence of that person. The light has gone out, the consciousness has left, and it's just flesh and bones, discarded by the soul so that it can continue its journey in another form, a non-physical one for the time being. So where does the soul go after death, in between lifetimes? This is one of the most common questions, and I'll try to answer this as simply as I can, although the answer is not so simple. Different souls go to different places within the astral plane, which is the non-physical dimension, just a little higher than yours in vibration. The quote from the Bible, "My Father's house has many mansions," refers to the many different places within the astral plane and also the many dimensions beyond the astral plane. What determines where you go on the astral plane after death is your level of consciousness and what your previous human selves want to experience and explore, and also what your soul needs in order to grow and heal. No matter where you land on the astral plane, a great deal of healing and growth is bound to occur, since that's the purpose for being on the astral plane in between lives. Just as the earthly plane is about growth and about healing the misconceptions and misperceptions of the human journey so that you can discover the love at your core, the astral plane is also about healing any misconceptions and misperceptions you still carry as a human being. This is good news that so much growth and healing occur between lives. It may seem like many die without having learned much. However, from your vantage point, it's impossible to evaluate how much a soul has learned or will learn from a particular lifetime. It may seem like someone has learned nothing or even regressed and devolved, but that's never the case. The beings guiding your soul will help you learn from the lifetime you've just left through a detailed and compelling life review. In this life review, you not only see how you were affected by others, but how you affected others. You get to see behind the scenes in a way that was impossible when you were alive. You finally get to know some of the things you couldn't have known while you were alive. Just as you observe a movie character and understand things about that character that the character doesn't see about himself or herself, and know what the other characters think about that character, you come to see yourself, others, and your life choices more objectively. At last, you're given the clarity and higher perspective you need to love yourself, love others, and love life. And you feel the deepest compassion for yourself and for those you've been involved with. You see where you haven't measured up, and you're shown how you might have behaved differently and had a different outcome. Through the life review, your guides attempt to motivate you to correct your failings and do things differently so that you'll experience less suffering and more love next time around. The role you played in your own suffering and the suffering you caused others becomes clear to you, and the pain of that usually motivates one to do things differently next time. The life review changes people, and this review is often where the most growth is accomplished. There's a catch, however. Although you see your life, your mistakes, and your weaknesses very clearly as a result of this review, once you reincarnate, your previous conditioning and misunderstandings will still prevail to some extent, at least initially. You'll still behave in many of the ways you used to in your previous lifetime or lifetimes, but your failings will be much easier to see through and overcome as a result of the coaching you received on the other side. You'll have some access to the wisdom you gained when you were between lifetimes. The life review is, to a great extent, where wisdom comes from. The more lifetimes you've lived, the more practice you've had at overcoming the issues entailed in being human. The arrogance, fear, selfishness, impatience, carelessness, irresponsibility, judgment, and so on that cause you to be unkind and make poor choices. As you evolve through your many lifetimes, you become a wiser and more loving person, and you naturally make better choices. Older souls have a much easier time on the physical plane than younger souls because of all they've learned throughout their many lifetimes. This learning is stored in their soul, and they have access to it through their intuition. This explains why some people are more naturally and more easily loving and wise, while others struggle so much. There is really no other way to learn what you need to learn as a human being than by making mistake after mistake and learning from those mistakes. The soul is not the least bit impatient with this process, but of course the ego is, and patience with this process is also one of the lessons. I said that there are many mansions or places on the astral plane that people go after they die. After death, nearly everyone experiences a period of healing, since death is often traumatic for a person, even if there was no actual trauma. So many have false ideas about death that cause them to suffer unnecessarily, and those false ideas need to be healed or seen as false. So the first step for most souls is healing of some sort. One of the problems with some religious ideas is the fear they induce about what comes after death. Christianity, for one, in its belief in hell and punishment after death, causes so much unnecessary pain and fear for people before dying, and even after dying. When people are full of self-hatred, regret, or deeply depressed, they're taken to an astral hospital of sorts to help them heal those emotions and see life more clearly and truly. This healing is not so easy to accomplish when guilt and fear are deeply inculcated by religion or otherwise, because it's often difficult to convince such people who've crossed over that they have nothing to fear and that they won't be experiencing punishment. Religious beliefs about hell keep many in a hell of sorts of their own making. Because they believe in hell, they insist on experiencing it, and so some do suffer for a while before they're willing to accept the truth that they are loved and forgiven and allowed to have a good and happy life on the astral plane. And then there are those who remain attached to earth because they have addictions, fears, or trauma that prevent them from moving on from that lifetime. When one's body has been physically addicted to alcohol or drugs, for instance, the individual is often drawn to continuing to experience that addiction through those who are still alive by attaching to their energy field and possibly influencing them through the voice in their head. Such disembodied humans hang around drug addicts or people in bars and encourage their addiction because they're able to live vicariously to some extent through such people. Some disembodied souls are also very afraid of experiencing and exploring their new home on the astral, or they believe they're unworthy of any happiness there, or they simply don't realize they're dead because they died so suddenly and unexpectedly. Some land in a dark place on the astral plane because of their fear and confusion, and stay there a while until they're ready to experience themselves differently. Your general state of consciousness, or the state of consciousness at death, determines what you'll experience most immediately when you cross over to the astral plane. The different places or mansions on the astral plane represent different states of consciousness, and people tend to go to a place that matches or reflects their general state of consciousness. This can change, of course, once they undergo more healing and their consciousness shifts to a higher, more light-filled state. Then their experience of the astral plane becomes more joyful. Any experience is possible on the astral plane, and no one is doomed to any particular place. You choose where you are, in a sense, by choosing your state of consciousness, although this is rarely a conscious choice. For this reason, the various mansions are often inhabited by like-minded souls, that is, people who have similar belief systems, since your beliefs or lack thereof determine your state of consciousness. So there are religious heavens, so to speak, which aren't very heavenly, but are inhabited by those with similar religious views, who continue living out these views. In these cases, a savior might arrive periodically to try to help free these individuals from their limiting belief systems, which is one way people eventually move on from these so-called heavens. I would be remiss if I didn't mention the wondrous possibilities of those who are unfettered by negativity on the astral plane. Once the disembodied are freed from their fear, guilt, anger, and other negativity around their death and previous lifetime, they're allowed to create and experience all manner of experiences simply by choosing to have a particular experience. On the astral plane, you can experience and explore anything you'd like and learn from these experiences, just as you do in your incarnations. People often choose to create lovely homes and environments and express their creativity in other ways. Some compose music, others paint, some study various subjects, while others teach, heal, and help others in various ways. The time in between lifetimes is another lifetime in a sense, one much freer and more carefree once you've overcome any blocks to experiencing the love and freedom that's available there. There are many angels, guides, and discarnates available to assist those who are new to the astral plane, and as you've so often heard, there's nearly always a loving welcome committee of family members and friends eager to assist new arrivals in feeling at home. Knowing all of this, I hope that at death you'll be able to set aside all fears of death and know that you'll be lovingly guided throughout, no matter what your state of consciousness. May this knowledge further shore up your resolve to be positive and live in a higher state of consciousness, so that you have the easiest and most positive transition possible. Thank you for being open to this message. I am with you always.